Hey everybody, this is Justin from RPGsite.net on the YouTubes, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about a game that just recently came out in the States called Bravely Default for the Nintendo 3DS. Now, this of course is from Square Enix and Silicon Studio, and it is a role-playing game, go figure. RPGsite.net, hello. But my question on this game, and it's not so much that I think the game looks bad. It looks great. I have a copy of it right here in my hands I purchased, and on the back it says, "Embark on the ultimate fantasy RPG for the Nintendo 3DS. Explore the vast world of Luxendark and as a warrior of light." Now, people have been saying on certain forums that this game does Final Fantasy better than Final Fantasy does. Well, there's kind of a reason for that. This is a spiritual successor to the 2010 video game called Final Fantasy: The Four Heroes of Light. Now, the question on this game is, well, why did they name it Bravely Default? Why not just call it Final Fantasy? I don't really have an exact answer for that, but I was curious why you guys... because if you play the game, you can clearly see things that are in here that it's like Final Fantasies, Phoenix Downs, etc. Certain aesthetics, certain character names, etc. It's got all the trappings of Final Fantasy. Granted, it also has a lot of experimentation in the game, but it's just interesting why they decided to not use Final Fantasy. And they've never had a problem with this before, as you've seen all these other spin-offs: Final Fantasy, Crystal Chronicles, Final Fantasy, the Heroes of Light, as I said, Final Fantasy, the Crystal Bearers. They have never had a problem with just slapping the Final Fantasy name and a subtitle and it being its own thing. So I wonder why. Now, there's some theories that some people think they just didn't want people to get confused with the current Final Fantasy 13 arc that's going on, with Final Fantasy 13 Lightning Returns coming up Tuesday. I don't know if I follow that. I don't know. Because it's interesting, because Bravely Default does a lot of interesting things. The whole battle system is interesting. You can like build up your rounds to then do multiple attacks, and you can also like kind of go in the hole and end up having to wait turns because you used up too many advanced attacks. So it's a little bit more tactical. But the other things that are really neat on it is like how you can basically change the difficulty on the fly. You can also change the random encounter rate to pretty much 0 or high up if you're having problems. There's a lot of cool little tweaks with this game that you don't see a Final Fantasy doing. Does this mean Final Fantasy will do this in the future? I don't know. But I just find it fascinating that they went with Bravely Default and did not name it Final Fantasy, because Final Fantasy, don't get us wrong, for all the people that dislike 13 or 10 or 12 or whatever, Final Fantasy is a name brand. Final Fantasy sells. I'm not even going to lie, whenever I see something with Final Fantasy, I'm like, oh, yeah, gosh, I'm going to check that out. So, for all those wondering, Bravely Default's a pretty good game. I've only played a little bit of it, but from everything else I've read on it and from my experience, I'm highly enjoying it. But there are some issues that stem up later in the game. I'm not going to spoil that for any of you. If you want to find out the answers on there, they are out there. It's not so much from a gameplay perspective, it's just more from a design perspective, if you ask me. But that's just my 2 cents. If you guys are playing Bravely Default, what are your thoughts on it, and what do you think? Why do you think they didn't name it Final Fantasy? Do you have a reason? Maybe you know more than I do. Alright guys, thanks for watching, and as always, stay tuned to RPG Site on YouTube for more RPG goodness, and for great articles and reviews typed up, RPGsite.net. Have a good one.